Well, welcome on this Thursday. Glad to be with you again. And today I'd like to look at Hebrews chapter 12. Here we find a tremendous admonition that helps us in the practical aspects of our life. I have said before in these chats and as well as in church that some of the things that are happening to us in our country today really are a wake-up call for us as God's people. I've even used the term we've been taken to the woodshed because we haven't been what we should be, and always cultural decline has to find its origin in the lack of the church being what it ought to be. Certainly Satan's what causes it, but we have power over Satan. And that's just one example of how God can deal with us and wake us up. Read in verse 5 of chapter 12 with the example of Christ who went through so much for us. And ye have forgotten the exhortation which speaketh unto you as unto children. My son, despise not thou the chastening of the Lord, nor faint when thou art rebuked of him. For whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth, and scourgeth every son whom he receiveth. You know, one of the real keys to having solidity in the Christian life is to understand that God is lovingly and kindly working in us to wake us up to the self-life, our rebellion, some of the deceptions that we allowed into our thinking. And sometimes he does have to do things that we consider negative to get our attention and to free us from ourselves. Certainly the situation in America is doing that for a lot of believers. But then there are individual trials and individual situations, or just maybe a strong message and the conviction that God brings to your heart. That's the best way in the world to have God deal with you. Those are all ways that God works. But there are two reactions that can cause you not to be encouraged: to despise and also to faint when we do go through some of these times. I'm amazed how many Christians will get very frustrated and look down upon this kind of a situation where God's dealing with them and trying to draw them to himself, and instead they react to it. And we got to be very careful right now. Let's not react to what's happening to us. Let's don't get mad about it. Let's be humble and let God do a work in us, because if the church will be what it ought to be, well, a lot of this can be corrected. And for us individually, as we go through trials, don't despise the chastening of the Lord. That means you don't trust him. That means that we're more about ourselves than God's will. We are more about having things the way we want it than knowing God and truly having the right relationship with him. And then we've got to be very careful not to faint. It's very easy to give up and just get depressed, get off in our own little corner, and miss the fact that God's about to take us into new territory spiritually. This is all good. This is all a freeing from the hold of the flesh to give us the right perspective so the Spirit can liberate us and strengthen us for the work that he has before us. And so as we think of these things that we don't like, or individual trials that we may be going through, let's really take this admonition. Don't despise the chastening of the Lord. Don't faint when you're rebuked of him, because he loves you. For whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth. Learn to appreciate when you are really frustrated. Appreciate what God has allowed. Learn what you need to learn and realize that he loves you, and bask in the love of God. And may God cause us to be encouraged as we go through these trials, because he's doing something that's wonderful, and he will do something that will glorify him.